I've always loved fishing. There's something about the solitude, the quiet lapping of water against the boat, the early morning mist rolling off the lake. It's one of the few things that brings me peace. That's why when my best friend Mike suggested a weekend fishing trip to Black Hollow Lake, I didn't hesitate. "You ever heard of it?" he asked, grinning as he handed me a beer. We were sitting in his garage, planning our trip. I shook my head. "No, but if it's got fish, I'm in." Mike laughed. "Oh, it's got fish, all right. Locals say it's been untouched for decades. Perfect for us." I should have asked why it had been untouched. We set off early Friday morning, driving 5 hours into the deep woods of northern Maine. The road narrowed the further we went, and soon we were surrounded by towering trees, their canopies so thick they blocked out the sun. "This place is remote as hell," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "That's the point," Mike said. "No cell service, no people, just us and the fish." By the time we arrived at the lake, the sun was starting to set. Black Hollow was eerily beautiful. The water was unnaturally still, a perfect glass mirror reflecting the darkening sky. A thick fog hovered just above the surface. Something about it made me uneasy. "Let's set up camp," Mike said, grabbing the tent from the truck. "Tomorrow's going to be a great day." I forced a smile and nodded. As we were unpacking, an old man emerged from the tree line. His skin was weathered, his clothes tattered. "You boys camping here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Mike, ever the confident one, nodded. "Yeah, hoping to catch something big." The man's face darkened. "You should leave before nightfall. That lake's cursed. Has been for years." I glanced at Mike, expecting him to brush it off, but there was something in the man's tone that made my stomach knot. "People go missing out here," the man continued, "and sometimes they come back, but they ain't the same." Mike laughed nervously. "Appreciate the concern, old-timer. We'll be fine." The man didn't argue, he just stared at us a moment longer before vanishing into the trees. Morning came with an eerie stillness. No birds chirping, no rustling in the trees, just silence. We paddled out onto the lake, casting our lines into the water. Within minutes, Mike's rod bent sharply. "Damn, this one's huge," he grunted, reeling it in. As the fish broke the surface, I felt my stomach turn. It wasn't like any fish I'd ever seen. Its skin was almost translucent, its eyes sunken and hollow. The thing writhed violently, its mouth opening and closing like it was gasping for something other than air. Mike laughed. "What the hell is this thing?" Then the screaming started. It wasn't coming from the shore, it was coming from the lake itself. The sound was unnatural, a chorus of wailing voices, layered on top of each other, rising from beneath the boat. It sent a chill straight through my spine. "Jesus, do you hear that?" I whispered. Mike didn't respond. He was staring at the fish, his mouth slightly open. Then, without warning, he plunged his hands into the water. "Mike, what the hell are you doing?" I grabbed his shirt, trying to pull him back, but he fought me, harder than he should have been able to. His eyes rolled back, his body convulsing as if something was pulling him down. Then, just as suddenly as it started, he went still. His head snapped toward me, his voice eerily calm. "We shouldn't have come here." I felt ice run through my veins. That night, I lay awake in my tent, heart pounding as I listened to the sound of the water. The lake was no longer silent. Something was moving beneath the surface. At 1:34 a.m., I heard Mike's tent unzip. "Mike?" I whispered. No response. I peeked out of my tent, my flashlight beam cutting through the fog. Mike was standing at the edge of the lake, barefoot, motionless, staring into the water. "Mike, get back here," I hissed. Then he walked in. No hesitation, no struggle. He just disappeared beneath the surface. I ran to the shoreline, plunging my arms into the freezing water. Nothing. No ripples, no bubbles, just silence. The next morning, I found Mike's boots sitting neatly outside his tent. His clothes were still inside, untouched, but the boat was gone. I searched the woods, calling his name until my voice was hoarse. No footprints, no broken branches. The old man's warning echoed in my head. Sometimes they come back, but they ain't the same. Weeks passed. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, that maybe Mike had just left. But then, last night, I got a voicemail. It was from Mike's number. The message was 5 seconds of silence. Then, just before it ended, I heard it, a faint splash, and something whispering my name. I didn't start fishing to confront the darker corners of human nature. I did it to escape. After the divorce, the quiet rhythm of casting a line into still water became my therapy. That's why I drove 6 hours to Lake Viridian, a secluded spot in the pine-stitched wilderness of northern Maine. The online reviews called it untouched and serene, which meant no jet skis, no screaming kids, just the whisper of wind over water. The rental cabin was exactly as described, a one-room shack with a wood stove, a moth-eaten couch, and a view of the lake through grimy windows. The owner, a grizzled man named Harlan, handed me the keys and a warning. Don't go out after sundown. The lake gets strange at night. I laughed it off. I wasn't afraid of the dark. Dawn broke in shades of peach and lavender as I rowed the dented aluminum boat to the center of the lake. The water was obsidian black, so still it mirrored the pines crowding the shore. I cast my line, the lure plinking softly. For hours, nothing bit. Then, around noon, the rod jerked. I reeled in hard, expecting a bass or pike. Instead, I pulled up a child's shoe, a pink sneaker, size toddler, caked in algae. The laces were tied in a perfect bow. My stomach turned. It's just trash, I told myself. People litter everywhere, but when I tossed it back, the lake rippled like something had brushed against the boat from below. That evening, I met the only other person on the lake, a man in a patched-up waders and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He stood knee-deep in the reeds, casting with mechanical precision. "Any luck?" I called from the shore. He didn't turn. "Depends what you're fishing for." His voice was gravel, his accent unplaceable. I walked closer, but he vanished into the trees before I could ask his name. The cabin's silence that night was suffocating. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just the creak of old timber. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound like a fist pounding the dock. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The beam swept over the water, catching glints of eyeshine in the reeds. Raccoons, maybe. Then I saw it. My boat, untethered, drifting toward the center of the lake. The oars were still propped against the cabin. The next morning, I found the boat beached a mile downshore. Inside was a fishing tackle box I didn't recognize. Rusted hooks, a fillet knife crusted with something brown, and a Polaroid photo of a little girl in a pink sneaker. Her smile was gone, replaced by a blurry scream. The date on the back, July 12, 2019, 3 years ago. I drove to the nearest gas station, a ramshackle store called Pete's Bait and Tackle. The clerk, a teenager with a septum piercing, froze when I showed her the photo. "You shouldn't have that," she muttered. "Why? Who is she?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Emma Riley. Went missing during a family camping trip here. They never found her, just the shoe." My blood went cold. "Did they suspect someone?" She lowered her voice. "Some folks say it's the lake man, a drifter who lived out here years back. He'd fish at night, always alone. After Emma vanished, he did too." I returned to the lake at dusk, the Polaroid burning a hole in my pocket. The other fisherman was there again, waist deep now, his hat pulled lower. "You ever hear of the lake man?" I called out. He paused mid-cast. "Superstitious nonsense." "Then why'd you leave this?" I held up the tackle box. He turned slowly. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken like caves. "You're digging in places you shouldn't." Before I could speak, he sloshed toward shore, his movements jerky, unnatural. I ran. That night, I dreamed of Emma. She stood in the lake, water lapping at her throat, holding her other shoe. "Help me," she mouthed. I woke with a start, sweat-drenched. The cabin reeked of mildew. Driven by a feverish need to know, I took a flashlight and dove off the dock. The water was icy, swallowing the light after 10 feet. I swam deeper, my lungs burning, until my fingers brushed metal, a car, half buried in silt. Through the shattered windshield, a skeleton grinned back. I surfaced screaming. The fisherman stood on the dock, fillet knife glinting. "You shouldn't have come up here," he said. "City folks always think they're smarter." I scrambled back, but he lunged, dragging me onto the rocks. His breath reeked of rot. "The lake's hungry, always needs more." I clawed at his face, my thumb sinking into his empty eye socket. He howled, and I ran, not stopping until I reached the gas station. The police dragged the lake. They found Emma's bones in the car, along with 5 others. The fisherman, real name Marcus Dyer, was a former mortician who'd faked his death in 2015. Harlan lost his rental license. The cabin was bulldozed. But sometimes, when I'm near water, I see a shadow just beneath the surface, and I wonder what else the lake is hiding.